So there's these two friends, they're out hunting for boar in the woods, and one of them accidentally shoots his friend. He runs over really fast to check up on him, and he can't really get any sign of life from him. So he really panics, but calls 911 and says, I shot my friend, help me. What can I do? What can I do? And the operator says, sir, first off, I need you to calm down. The second thing I need you to do is go check on your friend and make sure that he actually is dead. And the guy says, okay, just a second. And the operator hears in the background. And he returns to the phone and says, okay, what now?
Very good.
And with that, I bid you welcome, because it's now 12:30, to this webinar, Safety First. Very happy to see a lot of you guys joined in. I can see that we are 32 participants now. I think a bit more signed up, so maybe there will be somebody joining in a while. But I'm very happy that this was possible, since we weren't able to have you all here in Odense at DTI, which I was looking forward to though. But this is an excellent alternative, and let's see how this works out with this a bit shorter program, but then that more intense, I think. Let's go through some of the practicalities to begin with, if I'm able to switch slides. All right, so first off, today's moderators will be myself, Aske. I'm project manager at DTI, and I'm managing the COVR project that is co-hosting this event together with RoboCluster. And then we have Signe Naune, who's here with me as well, and Morten, and we actually have Sophie as well, who I didn't put in the slides, so sorry, Sophie. But of course, shout out to all you guys for arranging this. So I'm only a small part of this event. To begin with, there are some practicalities again. So we have the agenda here in a shortened version. So we have this conference track to begin with, going from now and then until, well, it should say 12:30 actually, and then until 2 o'clock. And since you're all here, you figured out how to use the link, which is great. You need to do something very similar at 2 o'clock, where you need to join the track that you have chosen. So either the industry track, which is track 1, or the drone track, which is track 2. So in your information email that you received, I think it was yesterday, there are 2 links, and you just join the one that you choose. So when you do that, close this meeting down and then open the other one. And then at a bit past 3 o'clock, we'll all join together for our keynote speak and a wrap up at the end. So when you need to do that, you have to close the meeting you're in, so the track 1 or 2 meeting, and then join the original one again. So it's a bit tricky, but I'm sure you'll all manage. Then I have a kind request, and that is that you write your name and organization. I can see that most of you have done so already. So in the list of participants, you're able to right-click your own name and then rename it. So some of you might have like a weird 1YZ995 name, and that's not the name of Elon Musk's son. That's just like a random number that is generated when you join in. So please rename if that has happened. I can see a lot of you have your camera on, and that's just really nice, because that gives the presenter a nice feeling of feedback when presenting. Are people interested, and are they nodding or disagreeing? It's just really nice for the presenter, at least. Also, please keep muted while people are presenting, and if you have any questions, ask them in the chat. Then one of the moderators will pick up on your message and allow you to speak when there's a natural pause in the presentation. So you can either just like write a hand or a question and then ask it for yourself, or you can actually write the question in text, and then the moderator will ask the question for you. And FYI, we will record this event. So if you're not happy with having potentially a picture of you appearing if you say something during the presentation, let us know. Or if you as a presenter have some slides that you do not wish to have published, then also let us know, because we will just record this and then publish it online so people can view it afterwards. We will also try to keep a tight schedule, especially since we have 2 parallel tracks at one point. So the timing is central. To make sure that this is possible, then we will give like 5-minute warnings for the presenters. So when there's 5 minutes left, the moderator will say 5 minutes, and then hopefully the presenter will be able to meet that 5-minute limit. There will be some polls today. So to begin with, I'll see if the technicalities work. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's see when it pops up. Do you guys see a poll? If so, please try to give a response to these 3 questions. I can see that ticking in. Are you sharing the results right now? Okay, so we're new to using Zoom, at least here at TTI. So bear with us if there are some hiccups. But at least the pulse is working pretty good right now. Oh no. Scene is working on my side here, controlling the polls, so I can see people are voting again. Oh, sorry. Apparently a revote. Donald Trump deemed that it was not an eligible vote the first round. Okay, but I think already now I can say that it seems that we have a bunch of safety experts online. So a lot of people are already working with safety on a daily basis. So that's 2/3 of the participants. We can also see that we are a majority of technical guys online. Me personally, I'm actually not that technical. And the majority have also some familiarity with the standards and EU directives. So that's good. This means that we don't have to start at Adam and Eve with everything, which would make it much more smooth and hopefully more interesting. So that's good, but it also means that there are at least 3 persons online that doesn't work technical and haven't read an ISO standard or EU directive. So we might have to at least pick up on that as well. All right, so that was actually what I had. 2 minutes ahead of schedule, so that's good. That means that I can give presenting rights now to Ditte. So if from Danish Standard. So Ditte, if you're ready, I will stop sharing now and you can share a screen.
Thanks, thank you very much. I will just do this. It should work, right? And then I will just turn on my video as well. Hello. I think you should be able to now see the slides, right?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Aske. It's great to see that so many people have read a standard or an EU directive already. Well, so I think it's a really good starting point for this talk. Yeah, I think safety and standards are obviously 2 extremely important and very interconnected concepts that I'm very happy to have been invited to come and talk to you guys about today. Obviously, standards are kind of a set of requirements that help create safe products, among other things. But they are also concepts that are constantly changing, and they are developed by experts like you, which means that you're also able to influence their content. And I think this is a very important point when we're talking about safety requirements of kind of innovative products and cutting edge technology like we're here to do today. And I think standards have a very important role in this context both in terms of supporting innovative products to come to market, but also help with the scale up and the exports of these products. Anyway, these are some of the things that I'm going to be talking to you about today. My name is Ditte Klint Heede. I work for Danish Standards. I work with my colleague Søren, who is also online with us today, with our robotics standardization, among a few other things, but that's one of the main topics that I focus on. I'm also not a technical expert myself, so I'll try to answer any questions you have, but if it gets very technical, I may have to look into it and get back to you. Anyway, I'm here to talk a bit about today why standards are important in this context, and how you are able to influence standards, and also a little bit about what does the current robotic standardization landscape look like, and what kind of indications do we have of the future, which I think is a very interesting point when it comes to safety. And there may be a few out there of you who are already involved with our work, so that's really great. And there may be some of you who don't know a lot about, you know about standards obviously, but maybe not a lot about Danish standards and how the standardization process works. So I'll just give a short introduction to that before diving into some of the other topics. And obviously, as Aske said, I think you just answer questions on the chat as they come to you, and then our moderators will help get them through, because I don't think I can look at the chat and the slides at the same time, so that's really helpful. So Danish Standards is the official standardization organization in Denmark, and that means that we have the role of facilitating the development of standards and making sure that Denmark and Danish companies are able to influence the content of international and European standards. And all of this work takes place in our around 240 committees, which range from anything from robotics to toys to, I don't even know, nails and pipes and all sorts of different and very exciting things that are standardized. And in these committees, we have our experts who sit there and follow the work and are able to influence it. So we are not part of the Danish government. We are a commercial foundation, which means that we operate on market conditions, but we don't have any shareholders, and all our profit is invested back into promoting standards and developing new standards. We do have a relationship with the government, which is a very helpful way for us to make sure that we focus on the things that also are of political importance, and that the government is able to work with us. I'm just checking that I'm sharing the right screen.
You're sharing a slide with the silo office
cool.
in Nordhavn?
Yep. And yeah, sorry, just looking weird for a second. Yeah. Yeah, and those are our beautiful silos in Nordhavn, where we sit in Copenhagen normally. Today I'm obviously at home in my flat, but that's where we normally have our offices and where we normally have host all our meetings and events. So just the kind of basic, which may be stuff you already know, but I think it's just important to be clear what actually is a standard. So obviously a standard is a voluntary market instrument. And this means that that as a starting point, standards are voluntary. You don't have to follow a standard. Obviously, sometimes the standards are linked to European legislation, for instance, which we can dive into later if there's any interest in that. So they can have an almost legislative-like status, but as a starting point, they are voluntary. Standards are consensus-driven. So this means that they are developed through a process of consensus amongst international experts. And this is the reason why standards sometimes can be a bit of a slow process, and they can take a long time to be developed because you need to go through a lot of rounds of everyone agreeing. And this is obviously because to make sure that the content has a high quality, but also that there is general agreement that these are the requirements, so that when they are published, they are followed by companies and people around the world. So it is a slightly slow process, but it's also an important process to kind of create this consensus around the content. And then lastly, standards are adopted by an approved body. One of them is Danish Standards here in Denmark, and there are similar bodies all around the world. And I'll talk a bit more about how the different organizations kind of all hang together. But and that's just to say that in its essence, standards are a kind of shared language and a shared understanding of certain sets of requirements regarding safety and quality, and they can take lots of different shapes, and they can focus on lots of different aspects. But in its essence, that is what standards are, and that's obviously why the question of safety is so important when it comes to standards, and it is one of the key drivers for the reason why people want to have standards is usually a safety issue. Yeah. So again, why are we doing this? Obviously, it's very nice to have safe products, and it's nice to have products that are of high quality. I think we can all agree that there's some importance in that. But there's also a kind of more hardcore business reason why all these people are involved in standardization. And it is because when we look at the numbers that we've been crunching here, but also internationally, it does show that companies who use standards in their work tend to have higher productivity, increase exports, and added product value. And these are some of the reasons why lots of companies get involved in the standardization work. Yeah. Okay, so then we'll dive a bit into this kind of like standardization landscape as we see it here from Danish Standards. There's the kind of key organizations that we focus on. So obviously we have ISO and IEC, which are the large global standardization bodies. IEC focus on electrotechnical standardization, and ISO on all the rest. Robotics standardization tends to take place in ISO, so I will dive quite a lot into what's going on in those groups there. And then at the European level, which is the inner ring, we have the correspondent European organization. So CEN is the correspondent to ISO, and CENELEC is the electrotechnical correspondent to IEC. And then ETSI, which is telecommunications standardization. And then we put ourselves in the middle, because as the headlines say, we see ourselves as a strong player. Obviously, Denmark is a very small country when it comes to kind of making impact in these global organizations. But Denmark does actually have an important role to play in a range of areas. We are particularly active when it comes to issues, not very surprisingly, such as wind turbines, wind energy, toy safety, medical equipment, these sorts of issues where Danish businesses have a very strong say. And I would be very excited to be able to add robotics to this list as well, because it is an issue, it is a sector that we have a really big focus on. There's a lot of going on in Denmark, and we are very keen to kind of utilize that and make an impact on the kind of standards that are being developed in this field. So this is something that we from the Danish Standard side are very keen to support and to work towards. So I'm just gonna take a sip of water. Because I'm working from home, you don't get to talk a lot throughout the day, so when you have to give these presentations, it's like, so the question is, where are standards actually developed? And for robotics, as I said, the main global organization is ISO 2C99 Robotics. And this is something I'll dive more into. But there's also a European group which focus slightly on robotic standards, which is called CEN/TC 310 in advanced manufacturing. But the main focus and the development of the standards that are exciting and that we want to follow do take place in ISO. And this because there's this very exciting agreement called the Vienna Agreement between CEN and ISO, which means that you don't develop kind of competing standards in two organizations. One is given the lead, and in the robotics field, ISO has been given the lead, which means that the CEN group doesn't do that much. It has some technical responsibilities in terms of making sure that the standards that are developed are linking up to European legislation. But I think we'll leave that group aside for now, because there's not that much to dive into. But then in the middle and bridging these two is Danish Standards Committee for Robotics, which we call S850. Which is the kind of official gateway for experts to join this work, who wants to follow what is going on and maybe have some wishes to influence the content of standards.
Ditte, just a quick question. Can everybody join those working groups, or are they closed groups?
No, that is one of the foundations of, along with standards being consensus driven, another principle of standards development is that they're open to all. So individuals are able to join, but companies also, and academics and whatnot. So we're open for all sorts of people to join. I mean, obviously it tends to be companies, academics, and sometimes authorities who sit in our committees in general, but sometimes there are individual people who just think it's really exciting and want to spend their time getting involved. So that's also an option. Thanks, Aske. So the ISO TC299 is actually quite a new group. It was established in 2017, so it's only a few years old. And before that, it was part of the larger machine safety group, which is called 199, machine safety. And as a result of this, of the way it was created, there is a really strong focus on safety in the 299 robotics committee. I've put all the little working groups to the right side, and these are the groups where the actual standards are being developed. And we'll dive a bit more into some of them for now, but it kind of gives you a feeling of what kind of topics are being looked on in this group. So one of the biggest one, which has the most focus from the Danish side, is Working Group 3, Industrial Safety. And then there's a corresponding working group for service robot safety. And those are the kind of two main drivers of standards development. And now we're seeing a few more working groups that are popping up around, mainly focusing on service robots. But these are kind of the groups where the work takes place and where all the experts meet and decide on the standards. Yeah. So to look a bit,
Yeah, Ditte, actually I had another question. So if people want to sort of stay updated on what's happening in standardization, are there any new standards coming out, any changes, updates? Where would you look?
So in terms of what is coming up, there is an opportunity to join we have a hearing portal. I can add the link where everyone can kind of go in and then put in and you don't have to be a member of our committee and give their say as to what the new standards should be. But that is very late in the process. That's the last vote before they're published. So if you'd like to kind of get involved early on and kind of know what's happening, I'll give you a taster in some of my slides to see what's going on. But if you'd like to join that, you have to join our committee, S850. And please do, like, I put my contact details in these slides, and grab hold of me if this is something you'd like to hear a bit more about, because I'm very happy to go through that.
Okay, thanks.
So here's the kind of brief overview of who else is a member of the ISO TC299. Obviously not so surprising which countries are taking place. It's the kind of main industrialized countries around the world, and obviously some of the very active ones in the robotics field are the US, Canada, Korea, Japan, etc. Obviously also the European countries. They're currently working on, so they published 23 standards, and they're currently looking at either reviewing or developing 9 new standards. So some of them I'd just like to highlight to you what is going on. So these are standards that are being looked at in the group right now, and they're not publicly available yet, but just to give you a taste of what is coming up. So we have the big one in Working Group 3 is the update to 10.2.18, 1 and 2, which is the main safety standards for industrial robots. And this is a review which began in 2017, and they're looking to update the old standard, and it keeps changing a bit, but it seems that they will be published in 2022. So as you can see, it is a long process, and it's an extra long process because these are such important standards, and there's a lot to update because technology keeps moving. And some of the things they're looking at including in the new version of these standards is a focus on collaborative robots and a focus on cybersecurity. So this just to say that the standard will come out within the next few years, and I think it'll be very important, probably very important for you guys to kind of focus on if you don't already. Then there's a few new projects which have been set up, most of which focus in the kind of service robotics field. There is an interesting standard now, the 18646-4, which focus on lower back supporting robots, or what we could also call exoskeletons. So this is a completely new project, which was started again in 2017, and I think they're looking to publish that next year. So that should also be interesting to follow. And then a completely new group has just been set up, which look at service robot management systems. It's its name, WG7, which has just been set up last month. And they are looking to create a kind of a management standard in the style of ISO 27000 or 9000, 14000, those kind of big important management standards which set out, say, like guidelines for processes and how companies should kind of think about certain things, but with a focus on service robotics safety. So that's also interesting. It's a Japanese proposal, and it will focus a lot, I think, it seems like from the initial papers we've seen, on robots that are driving around, for instance, a cleaning robot in a shopping center, and the types of considerations that the robot service provider needs to think about and needs to discuss with the robot manufacturer. So that's a completely new project that we're also very interested in to follow. And then lastly, there's some really interesting internal discussions going on within the group about how should we structure all of this work. And it comes down to questions that are quite fundamental. Can you make a single safety standard for across all of robots, or should we have specific safety standards for different types of robots? This is one of the types of questions that they're grappling with right now, which will have a big impact on how all of this work is structured and how you think about robot safety in terms of standards. This is a study group that has been set down, and they're due to report in the middle of next year. So this is also something we're obviously very interested in following and seeing what comes out of that and what consequences that might have for the existing kind of set of standards. And then just to I've kind of touched upon some of it, but there is a few trends that we're seeing from our side in terms of where the kind of landscape of standards moving towards. So there's the big question of what is a robot, and standards people love to define their terms in very great detail, and they are struggling a bit with this question. And it matters a lot for kind of how we see standards, in which group do they take place. So again, these are the types of questions that the study group are addressing. But then another, I think, really important trend is that safety will remain one of the key focus for new standards, because the technology keeps moving and keeps innovating, and questions about safety just will remain absolutely vital for everyone. So for instance, once this new 10.2.18 standard comes out in a few years, I think the revision work to get it updated will start straight away again. because by then there'll already be many more questions that are really important for the standardization community to address. And then lastly, what we see is a lot more interest in having new standards that focus on service robots. So that we've seen this new working group 7 that has been established, but there are many more interesting projects that are coming out in that space. Yeah. And then I just wanted to show this slide quickly before I round up, which confuses the question a little bit again about where robotic standards developed. So obviously we have ISO TC 299, which have just introduced, but there are also a range of other groups that also touch upon robots, and that are also important to kind of be aware of. And it does muddle the picture a bit, and it confuses it a little bit when it comes down to this question of what is a robot. Because for instance, standards for AGVs, they are being made in the group that focus on industrial trucks. There are some specific standards within IEC that look at kind of specific electrical products, household equipment, etc., that also touch upon robots like cleaning equipment. And then obviously the whole medical field has their own standards for robot-like uses. And there's a new group which is just being voted on right now on whether it should be established or not in IEC, which focus on robotics for electricity generation. Or like that means robots that work in near proximity to power lines, for instance. So that would be a whole new TC which will work in alongside the TC on robotics. So that's just to say that there's a lot going on here, and it's a very interesting field, and there's a lot of new stuff coming on, which is very interesting to kind of keep track of and follow. Yeah.
That was your time. Actually, I see that we have a question from Leonard. So maybe you can spend 20 seconds to reply on this one. So he asks, do standardization bodies like DS consider themselves responsible for the standards that they publish? As in, if a robot was produced according to those standards, but an accident happens within the frame of that standard, do they consider themselves responsible to a certain degree?
And then the answer very quickly is no.
Okay.
So we're responsible for publishing them, and we don't have the I'm not sure what the term in English is, but we don't have the kind of advisor responsibility of making sure that the words are there are kind of legally compliant. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Ditte. That was the 20 minutes.
Yeah,
so
sure.
As I said, we will keep strict timekeeping here. So please, Tommy Ertbølle from Agro Intelligence, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. See on my screen. Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes. Yeah, I'm from the company Agrointelli that is producing this agricultural robot. Let me see. Okay. First, a little bit about the robot, just to give a little bit of context. So it's doing similar things as a tractor. Call it an autonomous tool carrier. So you can put on seeding equipment, cultivation to remove weeds, a lot of different implements that you can add to this robot. So it's designed for high precision farming operations, so that, for example, you can seed and weed with high precision, and in that way you also reduce the amount of chemicals that the farmer needs to use. There's a small video here. It behaves a little bit weird here. Okay, apparently the pointer is not working with starting the video. Okay. Here's an example from Czech Republic where it's seeding a field. So it's very nice for these very big farms, like you see here. So it's a 30-hectare field, which is a lot of football fields. Not sure how many. So we have sold this year to the Czech Republic and the Netherlands, and Germany, and Denmark. Then back to the title here, Safety Beyond the Laser Scanner. So I was wondering a little bit what that was all about. I tried just to give a brief overview of some of the things that are going on at Agrointelli and what we are working with safety. We still have a laser scanner, so that's still here. And some of the things I'll talk about is a little bit in relation to this with the laser scanner. It's not technical, but some of the challenges that we have. So if you look at the previous image here, here's an ISO test object that we have to detect as an obstacle according to safety standards. And we are challenged sometimes by scenarios like this, and suddenly there's high crops just on the side of the field and so on, which can be difficult to differentiate from that ISO standard. But what I want to explain a little bit about is then how we work with safety in the organization. Because sometimes as a startup, you also you really want to solve the farmer's problem, and you might go in and disengage certain features now when you're in production and you release software, you have to make sure that it's always safe, that it's testing all the safety features, and of course all the other features also, but particularly with the safety features. So I'll talk a little bit about the safety requirements, some about our functional safety process, and give a little bit overview of what state of the art in agriculture looks like, more on the standards and the tools available for us to work with, and then a little summary and outlook. So in self-driving cars, SAE has made this levels of autonomy, and the company CNH, which is a big player in agriculture, has made something inspired from that, where they try to group the different levels for autonomous agricultural vehicles. So today you have a lot of this guidance in the field where a tractor is driving by itself, but there's still a person. We also see these where one vehicle is actually steering, so the combine can steer the tractor here, offloading grain automatically, but still with people on board. Then there's this one, I'm not sure if I see that one I haven't seen that in the field, so I'm not sure how well it fits, but then when we come here to level 4, is what we call supervised autonomy. And this is where we are right now. But we are working on quite intensively is to move to this full autonomy. So this is no local supervision, but remote supervision, so not artificial intelligence, but having the possibility for the farmer to operate from his office or hand it over to someone else being responsible, supervising the robot. So safety requirements today, there's of course a lot of details, but I'll just take the top ones. So one thing is geofencing. So it's really important for us that the robot stays within the field. You can imagine if a robot would drive into a road next to the field, that would be probably one of the worst things that could happen. And the other main thing is on the obstacle detection. So if a person gets into the field and gets hit by the robot. And here, as I mentioned before, we have a standard that we are using, which is pretty nice because it's hard to say, yeah, what should you do as a company on your own? So we look a lot into this standard. And the safety systems on the robot today, we have a bumper. So if it hits something, so for example, the test object, we have this 3D LiDAR that is scanning the environment in front. And then we also added machine learning. So there's a camera mounted that is looking for objects in front of the vehicle. So especially these machine learning things are very complicated and hard to give any performance levels. But we still see a lot of benefit from these algorithms to reduce the risk. So we add them anyway. Then moving to remote supervision means that on certain sensors, we need higher performance levels from the safety, functional safety standards. We need to implement more advanced algorithms. So I must, for example, have to handle returns from sensors like laser scanners and so on. So it gets a little bit more complicated, and we'll be implementing them in controllers with an operating system that's called Safe RTOS. So we build on a platform that is ASIL-D. Then we need to integrate additional sensors. This work that I can't go into right now, but then we also need to have the supervisor logged in. And now the supervisor is not anymore someone with a radio remote control that can hit a safety stop. It's now someone who's sitting in an office far away. And this is then via the internet. There we are currently looking into something called Open Safety, which is a library that can ensure the connection. And if the connection is lost, then the robot would stop.
Tommy, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So you're obviously operating in a very uncontrolled environment. How do you address this massive diversity there is in terms of different changing conditions and the fields? The crops can grow, the light conditions can change, the weather can change. How do you test up against this diversity?
Yeah, so it's a lot about getting out in different field scenarios and collect data. So of course you try to foresee what can happen, but also, as I will come back to a little bit later, also just try to work in an agile way, and even though it's safety, then really try to get out into different scenarios and test your equipment and add improvements to the system.
Okay. I can also see that we have a question from Ulrich. What happens if you lose GPS signal via geofencing?
Yeah, then it will also stop. So,
okay. So it's just a full stop then?
Yeah. So
okay.
Connectivity and GPS, then it will stop.
Okay.
Because connectivity is in rural areas is a challenge. So we also, when the robots run around, we also logging and creating maps of how good is the connectivity and ping times and stuff like this. So, and the good thing is the connectivity is improving, so that's continuously going in the right direction for us. But for sure, it will in some cases limit us from some sales because customers do not have good enough connectivity.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so a little bit about this one, which is talking about this unstructured environment. Of course, agriculture is kind of semi-structured, I would say, at least on the field. And of course, this is not a scenario where we want to drive with the robots. It's just an example, a random picture with some humans in the field. So when the robot is running in the field, there shouldn't be any other persons there than the supervisor. But it is one of these things where it's really a dilemma. So there's this test object that's defined, but crops and especially weeds can sometimes get higher. So for us, it's a thing here where we can see we'll just continuously have to work with this and increase the performance of the system to work with more and more occluded test objects and persons in the field. So we just have to take a conservative approach, and then, but this is something where I think we would spend also in the future quite a few hours just raising the bar for what the robot can do in a safe way. So a little bit to the functional safety process. So also as a startup company, there's a lot of work in getting all these processes established. And this is the V model, which is a requirement that you work after this V model, which is that you specify your requirements and you do your system design, module design, and then here, as you test the complete system going up the V here, and then in the end you have a validated system. So over the last, especially half year, we've been looking quite a lot into how to deal with this at Agrointelli. So we work with Scrum and Agile. So we've been looking into what's what are other companies also doing in this domain on safety. So we kind of looked at taking this approach that we can just iterate the V and add more and more functionality, but really go through the V and come out. Maybe we won't have a complete system in the beginning, but then we add more functionality and we learn from what we see, and we try to bring it out into new test environments and learn more about that. So I put in a link here. So there's a lot of focus on this from the self-driving car community, also around software like ROS2. For example, this project Auto. So it's not, the ROS2 is not something you can safety certify out of the box, but there's a company, like mentioned here in the link, Apex AI, that is actually working on that. And there's some good information there also about how to work with it, with functional safety. So we made this overview for ourselves on how we work with safety. It's not completely fine-tuned, but I took a snapshot of it. So we are working Agile Scrum, and the tools that we normally use is Confluence, Jira, and Bitbucket. And so the way we work is then still with epics and user stories on the different hazards and on the user functionality. Break it down. Here's an example with a video feature, how it's broken down into the vision part and mechanical parts, electrical parts, getting to the cloud so that you can see remotely, see what robot, see the pictures from the robot.
Tommy, we have a question from Renata. She asks, is there a European Traffic Act that includes regulations for the use of autonomous mobile robots?
What?
Is there European Traffic Act that includes regulations for the use of autonomous mobile robots?
On the road?
Renata, you're free to unmute yourself and ask the question. Maybe I'm not conveying the message 100%.
Yes, hi Tommy.
Hi.
Yes, so yes, I mean use on the road.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure you're not allowed. I think you need a special license. At least in the US, you need a special permit to
It's
drive.
because I work on the project that includes autonomous mobile robots working on the fence inspection. So I was just wondering if there's any European directive that includes requirements for that use.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. So just to make it clear, our robot is not driving on any public road. So it's strictly for field use. And when you want to transport it, you have to put it on a trailer. So we are not so much involved in that.
Thank you so much.
Tommy, there is another question actually. So if there's only 2 minutes left, so is it okay with the question, or would you rather finish your presentation?
Maybe I should finish and speed up a bit then.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is, and then so we work in an iterative way. So we put on the V model like for normal Scrum process. And then here at the end, we have a gate where we're not releasing directly to the customers, but we release to our own test environment, both in the cloud and test fields with test robots to validate that the system is working. So this is a picture maybe some of you have seen, and I just wanted to add, I feel like when you're sitting just with your internally in your company, you easily end up adding a lot of stuff. I really recommend that then you collaborate with externals on the safety part. So we've been using a DTI senior directive consultant on our work, and it's good with that external view because you don't end up in overcomplicating things. And of course, also if you are not safe enough with what you come up with, it's also a help, of course. But I feel more it's like you go too much into you over-engineer it a bit. That's the highest risk, I think. So we have TÜV Nord internal expert on safety working at Agrointelli also, and then we are involved in European work on safety, which is also helpful to see what is going on. So this is focused on the agricultural industry to see what are others doing, and there's really a lot of work going on. We are also hoping for a COVR grant here soon to make a public test procedure on this, which I think is also important for us. So
okay.
standards.
Tommy, sorry, I have to cut you off now. So that was the 20 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
And strict timekeeping here.
Yeah.
Leonard posted a question, so maybe while the next presentation is going on, you could reply either like in the public chat or directly to Leonard.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry for being strict here, but thanks, Tommy. Very interesting topic. Okay, so next speaker is Robert Jønsson from Synch Law, who will give us a more legal perspective on safety. So Robert, take it away.
Thank you. So hopefully we'll be able to see.
Not quite yet.
Got
there we
it?
go.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
beautiful.
Thank you. This is so this is my presentation, and who let the lawyer in the room, might you ask? And it's all Aske's fault. He let me in the room, or us in the room. And who are we? We're a law firm, very tech focused, and this is quite new to me. Also being in Synch law firm, I used to be in Integra. We merged with Synch in the beginning of 2020. Personally, I've been working with robot companies, since 2013. Also being a member of the board in mobile industrial robots at an earlier stage, not now, and working with investments and commercial contracts in several robotic companies. So even though I'm not a part of the main group of engineers and technical people, I have had my experiences with this and still have. And one of the things that I've learned with this is it is quite a tech-driven and engineer-heavy industry, and that means I have raised some questions and about how might I be of support to the industry, and we participate in the COVR project, Synch Law. The starting point was like from a lawyer perspective. It's liability. Who's liable for what? And that was my first initial thought, is I could be of help to the robotics industry by finding out who's liable for what. And it's the question should be around for some years yet, because we'll not be able to find out on the flat hand, because it is as the Danish Standard also we're talking about, is the technologies are evolving very fast. Legislation is usually slow, so we'll find out maybe many years from now who did what and whose fault it was after a court case come to the High Court in 10 years on something that was built in many robotic generations ago already. So it might be, from a theoretical point of view, as a lawyer, it would be interesting, and it still is, and liability, of course, is still interesting. But we talked about, I remember at that conference where I met you, Aske, where you tried to convince me to put my hand into some kind of machine, and I thought, well, he looks like a nice guy, and he's talking about safety, so why not give it a try? I thought he also looked like someone who had a good insurance, and
show them the wound now.
And I lost it. No, what I'm talking about here is also moving from the liability approach to a more broader perspective, and that's why I made this childish drawings. That it's you can maybe decipher it. It says risk and compliance. So risk is obviously something that's a bit broader than just this strict liability, and not strict like in strict liability like in the produktansvars product liability. So we are developing right now this method of legal risk assessment, and we have performed some interviews with professionals from the industry, and we hope to improve, also assist in improving the toolbox to get something that is tangible, that you can actually use from not like we hear from the other participants here, but from the legal perspective in a broad sense. Technologisk is of course important in this setup. I also have we have a good cooperation with a local university in this part of the country, Copenhagen University, where we have Leonard, who's also in this conference. He's a researcher, and we are doing this postdoc, industrial postdoc together. And of course, the businesses in the industry, I mean, that's the most important. We need to find out where are we and how are we addressing these issues to understand where we're heading. So we are working on this white paper. It's in a draft version right now, still improving. So this is presenting a work in progress, and you heard of that before? I think everybody knows what that is about, presenting something in progress. We're in this development heavy industry, but to hear that from a lawyer, that might be new. So once again, this one is definitely not copyrighted. You can use it freely. I made the drawing myself. The list you see on the left side are all the influences, or some of the influences, that could or would create legal risks, and that had to be assessed in the development of your product, of your solution. And that's a lot. And there's even more to it. So the list is, it's now not the aim to provide a complete list on the in the cover toolbox for everyone to go through. And that sounds very unscientific, but it's not. It's part of the whole method that it's also an iterative process that you could benefit from in the development, but also in the deployment, in the integration phase, because we will not be able to provide the whole truth, and that's also what I hear from you, Tommy, that you experienced in your process. It's if you want to include everything and fulfill everything, you'll never get there. So you have to do the iterative process and find out which is the highest risk of these different factors to assess. I'm going to try to apply this on a case, and it's not a real life case. It's just something we invented, but I hear it's also I was quite happy to hear that in the ISO groups they're also looking at something like this. It was in a shopping center, I guess I heard, but in a public library might be the same. So from the technical standard point of view, you'll be able to take a lot of this into the same case, but we try to look at it from the legal risk in as I say, in a broad perspective. So the case is described as this autonomous mobile robot, the vehicle with some arm on the top and some technology to communicate, for example, with the dispensers, but also some chemicals or other technology to actually clean some spots that it would detect as cleanable. Being in I mean, already here we see a lot of different technologies that are integrated, and it would be nice, yes, to have this again from the technical perspective, have one standard to rule them all. But I don't really see that it's that we're going to get that, and that would be, again, apologize, but only the technical perspective. You would definitely rule something out and leave something out. So if we now try to apply at least a few risk factors through the method, it would look, for example, like this. We have addressed some of the risk factors and applied the general criteria, and in the right side, right column, you'd see how is this? Are we high on risk factor? Should we try to delve more into this? For example, the first one, the salience. It's super important to understand what is the level of possible risk for interacting with its environment, with human beings in a public space, and with a public space with at least sometimes you could expect a lot of people, and also with a technology that involves using maybe dangerous chemicals. We're going quite high on this salience risk factor. So that means we would be interested in looking into is this possible to should we do more on the technical side, like I hear the first solution that comes to mind when we think like engineers is like, okay, full stop. So as soon as something is, and there's a lot of circuits always making a full stop, and that is of course safe. I'll acknowledge that, but maybe sometimes we would be better off trying to see, is there another solution? Is all of this really a high risk, and what is it creating a safety risk for all its surroundings? Or I mean, we could go into the specific regulation that is on being in a public sphere. There was a question about this. We could also get back to that. So that's one of our factors we've been going into. Another I'd say is quite interesting in the bottom of this list, the chain of value complexity. Also quite often ruled out or not recognized in the tech-heavy industry, that it's like everybody has a sense that the last in line, the integrator, is the one who's collecting, he's assembling in the full solution, and first in line being the sale, and also taking the punch if something goes wrong. And that's maybe not even always true, and sometimes in some aspects it would probably also be more efficient to have some kind of distribution between who's actually taking the responsibility here. So this is, but in this the legal risk factor on this. Or the evaluation of this in this scenario, in this case, is also that there's a high risk, because as an end user, you might be facing a lot of different businesses to go through if something goes wrong. You might be able to look more on this at a later time. I think it's super interesting. Well, to round off this, where it's more like it looks maybe a bit like a commercial list, and probably it is, but it's also to for you to understand. We're trying to provide here some assistance, something practical. It's not only the strict legal services. We're trying to develop this method to self-application, so it would be to actually just broaden the view, and perhaps we might find some solution that is not the full stop solution, but maybe even a non-technical solution to some of the issues with safety and legal risks that we're facing. And my guess is that in the future we'll come to see tools like this being used in, for example, due diligence. If you need an investment and you already have processed some legal risk assessment on your product or solution, the investors would be happy to see that. We're talking maybe also from authorities, also requirements come that are not really hard requirements, a bit fluffy. You have to create. I mean, we all know about the data protection and privacy issues. That it's super hard to understand if you're not deep into it. And if we see this as the process, the compliance process, that would be also applying this tool would also get you first in line, so you're not the first one who will be shot at when someone is implementing explainable technology requirements, and maybe even down the line, the whole industry would become self-regulative instead of just having the passive attitude and waiting for someone to invent or even for the court cases to appear.
All right, Robert, I think that
Yes.
was time actually. So
that was time. Okay, I have my last slide with a
last slide.
nice picture of myself. No,
There he is.
if you have some, I mean, everybody is quiet because I'm talking all the time. But we want to get in contact with everybody about this. We want to have more discussion. We want to further develop this method, and if we want to talk with the technical, with the commercial people in the industry. So please, if someone seems this is just remotely or slightly interesting, give me a ping, a call, and I'd be happy to have a brief chat.
Cool. Thanks, Robert. I can see the chat. There's a question, but I'm a bit in doubt whether that is actually for Robert, because it sounds somewhat technical. So maybe this is Ulrich. Correct me if it's free for all to answer a question.
Well, it was more. I don't know. It's kind of a thought. I wanted to hear Robert had any thoughts on it. So my comment is that, Robert, you said, oh, full stop is always safe, except it's not. If you're on a slope, you don't want your wheels to be free. If you have caught someone against the wall, you do want the wheels to be free. So everything is in context, and your sanitizing robot is never going to be safe. Or is it? I'm not sure if that. It's not. Maybe it's just a thought. So I mean, but it just seems like you're never going to be able to have simple catch-alls.
No, and thank you for highlighting that, Ulrich, because I think that is exactly what it's a matter of estimating which risks are highest, and in the broad perspective, where should we look, and also to afterwards, if something happens, or when something happens at some point, we could explain that we actually did some research on this. We tried to comply not only with the core regulation, but also with some from all the angles that we could think of. It's the highest standard of care we could think of, not just the technical standards. So that would also improve the chances of surviving a court case or rejecting a claim. That, well, we tried even the unforeseeable. We tried to approach with this or take care of. So thank you for asking that question.
That's a good answer. Thanks.
Okay, that concludes the presentation from Synch Law. So I will now give a quick presentation on the COVR project and what it actually offers to the robotics community. So that will be the focus, not promoting a EU construct. So I will share my screen. Do you guys see my screen? People are nodding. That's
yes.
Good. All right. So a few words on the COVR project and what we're trying to achieve here. It will be a super quick 5-minute introduction to COVR and why we believe it's relevant and sort of what we're trying to achieve on a more abstract level. And then a live demo of something that we call the COVR toolkit, which I hope you will be excited about. And then finally, a few minutes, if we have it, for a Q&A. But actually, before that, I would like to have a quick poll. So Scenic, could you help me out here? What's the most challenging? Ooh, we have now 12 votes in, 15. Can we give 5 more votes? Well, I can't vote myself, maybe that's why. All right, we have 22 votes in now, and we see that there's a pretty close to even distribution between finding out what requirements a robot actually must live up to, then validating if the robot in fact does meet those requirements, and then actually only on the second place comes developing or configuring, so making the robot to be actually safe, so doing the technical part. So interesting here is that finding out what you need to meet in terms of requirements actually scores the highest here. And I'm happy with this result. So we're trying to address all these three areas, but the top one, we already have a tool available right now to help you for this. So I will close this poll now and then give you the quick introduction. So why is it that cobot safety is actually difficult? This is how we knew robotics 10 years ago. Oh, sorry, I need some more. So we have a fenced-in industrial robot here, and figuring out whether this was safe or not was somewhat binary, you could say. If you could enter the workspace while it was running, then you didn't have a safe solution, and if it wasn't able, you weren't able to get in there, then you can treat it pretty much as safe. There's modifications to that, but overall. Then came the cobots. Here we have a collaborative robot arm as we know it. It was launched as being a safe robot. I know there's a lot of discussion on that, but I'm not going to go into detail to that. But as a standalone product with no grippers or anything on end effectors, it was at least safe compared to the industrial robots that we were used to. Oh, sorry. Corona. So when you add a gripper, is it safe? Well, this is a collaborative gripper, so you would probably say that it's fairly safe still. Then you add an object that it has to handle. In this case, a rubber duck. It's probably pretty safe still. And usually people have a slide now where they have a knife in the robot. So I thought, how can I top that? Well, give it a hand grenade, and you would definitely say that this is not particularly safe. So it all comes down to how you use the robot. That's basically what it is. So that means we're always operating on a grayscale when we are talking cobots, because now all of a sudden we accept some pain with some collision, but how much? And that's always a question of finding a threshold. What is acceptable and what isn't? And this is obviously where directives and standards can help you draw this line and say, well, now it's safe, now it's not. But is it easy to find this line and draw it? Well, maybe if you are dealing with a pick and place operation in a manufacturing setting, you at least have a lot of other examples to follow, which makes the process much easier of drawing that line. It's quite well documented. But obviously we're seeing robots in many different forms and environments. This is one of the latest ones, right? The swapping robot. This just raises a whole lot of questions. We all know that. We have different types of cobots coming out all the time. So technology, as Robert said, is developing fast. So really the world is super diverse, and finding these standards and directives can be quite hard. I think you probably all know that. But then let's say that we actually found the right standards and directives. So we're safe now, right? Well, at least we answered the first of those three questions in the poll. But we still really need to know, is my solution, my particular solution, is that still safe? So are we on the good or the bad side of this line on the grayscale? Oh, there's sound here, sorry. We have a couple of different videos here running. I hope the sound doesn't mess up too much for you guys. But these are examples of a way to figure out, is this a safe robot or not? But this is not how we recommend doing it. So here we have Sami Haddadin, a famous roboticist from Germany who did a lot of tests and actually inserted himself. And obviously that was provocative and served as a sense in that way of getting some focus. But this is not how we say that you should test your robotic solution to put your head in, because obviously head collisions is a risk sometimes. Here we have a guy, he's doing something that seems pretty safe because this robot has a capacitive skin, so he moves in and we see that the robot stops. But take a look at this robot arm. It's pretty big. Both this test could go wrong, but this doesn't prove anything. I mean, it's not that I say that roboticists don't do that, because I know they do, and I know that you can have somebody with the safety switch outside of the picture, and I mean, that's fine. But the purpose here isn't really there. Like, you don't solve anything, you don't certify any products by, you can't say this is safe just because of you tested it. You have to be very, very thorough. You have to take so many different scenarios into consideration. And in the left corner, we see Søren Peter here. He demonstrates the safety, and again, it's nice that he does that. He's my good colleague, so I proved that he does so. He knows what he's doing, but still, it doesn't prove anything. So that's where testing comes in. Oh, the slides are messing a bit. So actually, we're trying to address this this very last need as well, where we talk about how do you validate the safety of your system. So how do you draw the line in the grayscale? How do you figure out if you're on the safe side or not? And actually, we also in the COVR project try to some extent at least to give some guidance on actually technical solutions and how to implement safety. So that was a bit of a teaser, just super quick. It's a project led by DTI in Denmark, but we have 5 partners across Europe. And the main things in this project is developing a toolkit that I will present just after this slide. Safety validation protocols, I'm going to get more into what that is. We have testing facilities that we have here at DTI, but we have them copied at the other partner facilities. And then we have something called the COVR Awards, which is basically 60 plus projects that we're doing together with the industry and also law firms, which is the exception, to gain experience, to get knowledge about that diversity that I tried to show earlier. So we don't end up with only knowledge from the cases that we personally have worked with, but we try to gather the community knowledge in a broader sense. So let's see, it's always dangerous with live demos, but I'm going to do it nonetheless. Do you guys see a Chrome browser? People are nodding, that's good. So here I am at toolkit.saferoundrobots.com. That's a pretty long URL. It will be changed to just saferoundrobots.com in a week. But you'll find it on this link as well. So I'm just gonna give my organization type here, other, and click Start Toolkit. And this is something that you can all access right now. So no cheating here. So what do we have? We have a toolkit that is freely available for everyone, where you can access a number of tools that you see out in the left side of the screen. You see my mouse pointer, right? Good. Let's go back to the first poll that we had. So what is the most difficult of those 3 things that we talked about, and what scored highest was finding out which directives and standards you should actually comply with. And for just that, we've developed a tool here. And pardon that this goes a bit like things loading a bit slow. It's because I'm presenting online. It's pretty fast otherwise. So I might have an application that I'm developing for a manufacturing setting. Let's just take the simple one for now. So yes, let's say I'm working in manufacturing. Then we have down here the results. That's the directives that I need to comply with and the standards that I need to comply with. So it already now, just by saying that it's manufacturing and working with, says that you should probably consider the machinery directive and the low voltage directive. And then there's a long list of standards that could be relevant. Again, I haven't given the tool much information at this point, so obviously there's a lot of standards. But we might say that we're working with a robotic arm, and then we see that the list is already reduced quite a lot. This is not the full answer, of course. This is still a long list, and you only gave it the information that it's a robotic arm in manufacturing. But compared to Googling around, which is basically the alternative at the moment, I would say this is quite helpful for a lot of people. You can simply click here and go to the directives over here if you want, and then you can get basically the documents. Obviously, we don't offer the standards for free. You still have to pay to get access to them, but it will at least tell you which ones you should consider. And we chose to make a list that are maybe a bit conservative, so there's maybe some that you wouldn't find to be relevant, but we found that it does save quite a lot of time for people that are new to directives and standards. You still have to go through them, so that's a challenge that you have. Then there was the question. The second highest ranking answer was actually implementing the safety, and for that we have some case stories here. So this is a library that we're very much building on right now, so it's still, I would say, somewhat immature, but it holds case stories of how we have tackled some safety challenges, both how to implement the safety, but also how to test it from a very low practical standpoint. So let's just take, which one should I take? Safety of a collaborative mobile robot. Click here. Then once this loads, download a PDF. You'll be able to read a nice story on how Enabled Robotics tested safety for their platform that consists of a MIA robot and a universal robot arm together. Obviously, you know, we can all imagine that there are some additional challenges to the fact that you have two movable systems at the same time. This library will be extended dramatically over the next year and a half. So the third challenge was how to validate the safety of your own system. And this is actually where we did the most work. And what we've done is we created what we call safety validation protocols. It's a tricky word, somewhat self-explanatory to some, but may not be completely obvious to others what it is. So I'm just going to put a few words to it. So it's basically a step-by-step guide on how to say, is my system safe or not? That being said, it doesn't give you the threshold that you have to be over or above. That's the standard, so you have to read your way to that yourself. But then if you know that your system can't exceed a force of, let's say, 180 Newton of force, then you can get a clear guide here on how to test whether you're above or below that threshold. So again, let's just keep it simple. Let's say we have that robotic arm going. But now you still have a few options over here in terms of selecting the feature of your system that you want to test. So for example, if you have a universal robot arm, you might say, well, I'm okay with collision. So I just want to make sure that it's not hitting me too hard. Then I want to limit physical interaction energy. So this produces a number of protocols. So test robot arm for collision with a movable object impact. So that is the collision where you're not restrained up against the wall, which would be the crush one down here below. So let's say that you want to test that. Then you click download on this protocol. And then this is where I'm in deep waters, because now we get the actual protocol here. And it's a long document and it's very technical. but it describes in full detail how you should set this up. What should the rigidity of the fixture that you mount your measurement device on be? How should you treat data? How should you emulate the skin features in order to get a correct measurement, and so on and so forth. It's extensive, I know, but right now we need to work towards getting sort of the ground truth. So what is the best possible measurement we can get? And then maybe later on in a year, 2 years, we can say, well, actually, we can simplify this and reduce it to this. It will mean that we are only within like 5 to 10% of the ground truth, but maybe that's good enough. So right now, we do acknowledge that these can be somewhat overwhelming for something that in one's mind maybe should be simple. But you find these documents in here. And let's say that you're not okay with actual collision, that you actually wanted to maintain a safe distance. So maybe you have a camera monitoring where the robot is and where the operator is. You have a capacitive skin or something like that. Well, then we have a protocol for validating that as well. We cover all domains, at least that's our ambition. So you can also go in and find something for rehabilitation, for example. So these are 3 of the main tools in the toolkit, and I don't have much time left, so I'm just going to super quickly say that we also have a very, very nice tool for doing risk assessment. So this is one of the first steps of working with safety for a new system. It's an iterative step, so you probably go back to it every once in a while. But we have a step-by-step guide on how we would recommend you to do it, but we actually have something new that we just released. That is videos actually showing you working with a cobot. You should be specifically aware of clamping, and you should do your trajectories like this. There's a lot of low practical information you can get in here. We also have information on what we call test equipment. So these are basically devices to measure either force or precision or rotation, all parameters that has an effect on how safe your system is. So if you don't know how to measure force, try to go in here and have a look. We have a lot of information on limitations and preferences. And actually, if you don't feel like buying it yourself, then where you can access these things. We have a library of publications on safety, where you can filter on what you think is interesting. Is it the legal side of safety? Is it implementing it? Is it testing it? You can search in here. And a FAQ, just the normal questions when working with cobot safety. So that was my super quick introduction to the cobot toolkit, and I hope you will use it because it's out there. We're still improving, we're still learning, but there's a lot of content already to come and find. Good. I have a question, I'm told. I have to switch over to see. Maybe somebody can just ask the question, whoever wrote it.
Yes, I was wondering if I use your tool to decide what to do, does your tool also help me write down sort of a legal argument or something for why this is the right thing to do?
No, we're not there yet. For the legal side,
will it do that?
No, well, for the legal side, we're gonna work with Synch Law and make a tool for that. And I think what the focus there is more gonna be on if you're producing a component, what's your liability profile and how do you figure out sort of the value chain of liability.
Right, I'm just worried there's an error in your tool and your tool forgets to tell me, oh, you have to test for this thing. And
Yeah.
no one ever thinks about it because the tool didn't suggest it, and I didn't write down anywhere what is my procedure for thinking about what to include.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you produce something written, then a human could check it afterwards.
Yeah.
I trust humans more than computers.
So obviously we don't want to put ourselves in the liability of having responsibility for how people use these things. But what we do is we say the standards are the one that tells you what to do. So we just help you find the standards. And then if you want to do measurements, this is how you do measurements. But you have to do the connection between these two things. So you had to move the threshold, so what you want to meet, the requirement you want to meet, put that in top of your protocol over here, and then complete the protocol up against that number that you found. We help you find it, but you put it in there. So that's sort of how we try to avoid being responsible for how people interpret this.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if that completely answered your question, but the best I can do. More questions? No, I think I have a poll more, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe we can run that now. So here, does the toolkit make sense for you? We're really interested. And what about protocols? Okay. That's positive. I'm glad. I didn't expect everybody to have the need for a toolkit, and I definitely thought that there would be people that would say that protocols are overly complex and therefore will not be used. That's the argument I've heard a lot, at least. So that's good. Somebody said, I can see down here that, I don't know if you can see the results actually. I'm reflecting on the results right now, but if you can't see them, then I'm sorry.
We can't.
Oh, sorry. Ah, there we go. I'll try once more before wrapping up here. So the COVR toolkit addresses a need from at least half of the participants, which is good. It's not a tool for everyone, that's for sure. And protocols, overly positive as well. Nobody said that they are overly complex and therefore cannot be used. A lot of some people said that simulation and practical experience can do the job better. That I hope in the long run that we don't have to do these tests, that simulations can be easy to do. Right now, I think simulations are often very hard to do. And at least one thing is that nobody will ever trust a simulation unless you can validate that simulation up against a measurement at least once. So you do need to have that protocol to test this before, otherwise you don't ever know if your simulation was right or wrong. That's my opinion on these things, at least. Okay, I think I've already crossed time. So being the organizer, I have that liberty. But I will end now, and then we should proceed out to the different tracks, and then we'll start those in 2 minutes.